More than 3 years ago in their world, our heroes were recruits in the Black Wheel program, an off-the-books effort by the dragon-marked houses to train those with so-called aberrant marks as soldiers, a tool for the houses to take advantage of the chaos of war. The four of them made up a single unit trained to work together. Ari, the Koravar with psychic abilities, Shade, the shifter whose mark wields the chaotic powers of nature, Pog, the half-orc barbarian with a pyromantic mark, and Esri, the Kalash Tar with innate necromantic powers. But with the end of the war came an end of the program. The heroes were told the program must shift purposes, but before they could learn what this new purpose would be, their guide and teacher, Soren Dimidani, was attacked by a senior member of the program, Thora Tivine, and her friend, Dane. After a brief fight, Thora stayed to hold off the guards, and Dane led the heroes out of the facility, explaining along the way that the usefulness of the program was at an end, and the houses intended to kill all the marked trainees and scrub the evidence. Led by Dane, the heroes escaped into the streets of the city of Korth, far below the floating citadel of the 12 that had been their home. Dane advised them to disappear, and then went back to find Thora. Left to their own devices, the group made their way to Stormreach across the Thunder Sea. Along the way, Shade considered fleeing into the wild. The forest had always guarded her ever since her days among the green singers of the Elding Reaches. But before she could, Ari noticed and convinced her to stay, to take another chance on family. After 18 months in Stormreach, the group had managed to find a home of sorts. Pog worked as a bartender at the Sword and Shield, a bar sponsored by one of the town's militias, the Swords of Karn. Esri, making potions and toxins for a black market dealer called Gerald Goodblade. And Shade working as a thunder guide, leading expeditions out into the jungles of Zendrick, and earning a good reputation, as the jungle seems to allow her to pass and rarely inflicts her with the Traveler's Curse, a phenomenon in which the jungle paths seem to shift and move unexpectedly. Only Ari had refused to give up an adventurer's life, and frequently ventured out into the neighborhood of Cross, doing his best to secretly hinder those who would take advantage of the less fortunate, which often brought him into conflict with the city's gangs. Luckily, Ari seemed to have a knack for being forgotten, a side effect of a curse laid on him long ago by an archfey known as the Forgotten Prince. But above all, they hid their marks. This relatively peaceful existence came to a crashing end one day. After helping the famous explorer Hallis Martain deal with a minor mummy problem, the group returned to the city in search of lunch. Instead, they found a young girl, Donabella Brightdoom, being pursued around the market by the animated contents of her mother's kitchen. Forced to subdue the girl, the reluctant rescuers hurried her inside, only to discover that she, like them, bears an aberrant mark. Empathy overriding better sense, the group revealed their own marks to Donabella and her mother before being kicked out of the house. Donabella's arrival revealed a rift in the party. Fear of exposing themselves warred with concern for the girl's safety. A deep divide developed between Ari and Esri over the dangers of risking their anonymity in order to help people around them. For the time, the conversation was tabled, and the characters decided to keep an eye on Donabella at a distance. Meanwhile, adventure found our heroes. They helped Pog's employer deal with a boggle infestation at the restaurant, and Shade and Pog worked together to free jungle animals captured by House Vatalis. In the course of this, Pog won a bet with the renowned gladiator Kolos and claimed the Minotaur's axe, Fury's Edge, and Shade liberated Kalembra, a peacock-colored fey panther who became her closest friend and companion. In rescuing Cal, Shade learned that their marks can grow in both power and size, a discovery with troubling implications. At the same time, the heroes discovered that another of their old Blackwheel classmates, Tommel, survived the disastrous mission into the Mournland and had taken up with a violent gang known as the Stormhammers, believing the visions of their leader, Mirren, that will make a world better for those with aberrant marks. The question of whether or not to get involved comes to find the heroes when Mrs. Brightdoom arrives at their door. Donabella had gone missing, and in harsh words with Mrs. B, the characters promised to find her daughter. The trail led to the Rubble Warren, where they met the Rubble Warren gang, a group of children who create and complete their own quests in the longing to become adventurers. They were led by a human boy named Kadric, and include the half-orc Bajak, a scion of House Tharashk, a drow girl named Ilya, whose tattoos hint at true adventures in the jungle, and a kobold named Levexi, who lost her clan in the Undercity and now lived in the Warren. Discovering that Donabella went into the Undercity on a quest, the heroes followed after her, Finding Donabella in a giant crypt, the heroes began to make their way out, only to discover that the Rubble Warren gang had followed them in as well. Grabbing the children, as well as a Vatalus agent from a swarm of Kruthic, the heroes escaped from the catacombs back to the surface, only to find themselves trapped by the Stormhammers. Unwilling to let the Vatalus agent be murdered, the players fought, only for the combat to be interrupted by a masked vigilante called the White Raven, who stole something from Tommel that was recovered in the catacombs before escaping, pursued by the Stormhammers. After returning Donabella and her friends home, the heroes had their first experience of genuine thanks, receiving crafted goods from Ilia's tribe, the Moonspears, and sandwiches from Mrs. Brightdoom. Once again, the group tried to find a normal life. Ari learned Giant by apprenticing at Black Iron, a smithy run by Hular, the father of their friend Solarka. Pog plucked up the courage to take Solarka on a date. Shade got advice on caring for a panther from her friend Harish, another shifter and proprietor of the ship's cat, a feline-friendly eatery. And Ezri convinced Geralt to build him an alchemist's workshop. But once again, normal does not last. Tommel arrived, informing Ari that since the group disrupted his attempt to recover an artifact in the catacombs, they would need to steal a map for him. If they refuse, the Rubble Warren gang will be in danger. A debate ensued over whether to attack the Stormhammers or do the job, but eventually the group agreed to do Tommel's job after doing their best to warn and protect the children. Ezri and Pog went to case the map shop, while Shade and Ari went to speak with the Wayfinder Foundation and Explorers Guild about the destination of the map, Hakeb Kalnek, the Obsidian City. In the course of the research, Shade asked Halas Martin about her recurring dream of a city in the trees being destroyed, and learned the legend of Shaetirias Tulai, a face spire once found in the deeps of Zindrig that was destroyed and plundered by the giants of the Kulsir Dominion ages ago. Meanwhile, Pog convinced Ezri that they should go for the map immediately. Pog hid himself in the shop using his newfound ability to become invisible, yet another incarnation of the strange phenomenon Ezri has noted of some sort of spirit seeming to protect Pog in danger. Then Pog waited for the shop to close to steal the map. After waiting the day away, Shade and Ari became concerned and went to find their friends. Finding Ezri in the market, they also discovered that their old Blackwheel combat instructor, Falco de Dineth, is there, with a few of his men having dinner. When Pog burst out of the shop and made a run for it, Falco and his men pursued, followed by Pog's friends in a chaotic street chase. Pog was cornered by Falco, but saved by a strange necromancer who unleashed a group of zombies against Falco and his men and demanded the map. In fear and rage, Pog unleashed his growing mark and set the alley on fire and fled. Arriving moments later, Ari saw the fire and the corpses of the zombies and feared his friends were dead. Lost to rage, he attacked Falco, killed several of his men, and was nearly killed himself. The whole group arrived and found themselves cornered by Falco, only to be rescued by a mysterious cloaked woman who created darkness to let them flee. Fleeing into the woods for the night, the shaken heroes regrouped, accused one another, and debated on what to do now with the map and themselves. After long discussion, they decided to follow through and turn the map over to Tommel. To their surprise, Tommel accepted the map and cleared their debt with the Stormhammers, and then promptly disappeared with the rest of his gang. Pog and Shade went to tell the Brightdooms and Moonspears that the danger was past, and discovered that the Moonspears had taken matters into their own hands and killed at least one Stormhammer to send a message. Ilia's father, Soleil, tells Shade that she can call on them at need, and that those who risk themselves for you are family. Pog spoke to Mrs. B and learned a bit more of her history. She told him that Donabella had already lost her brother and father, and that friendship with her comes with the obligation to be careful and not let her lose more. Back at home, Pog told Ari that he felt like Ari had been ignoring the opinions of the rest of the group, which triggered a long-held fear that in Ari that his mark might be inadvertently manipulating those around him to do what he wanted. That same morning, Ezri discovered that the bust they received as a reward for helping Halas with a mummy contained the spirit of a long-dead elf whose voice his mark allowed him to hear. Shaking his understanding of the world, the elf, Jaler Alarente, tells Ezri that his mark was not in fact an aberrant mark, but the mark of death, born of old by the elven house Vol. However, Ari's lack of what Alarente sees as proper respect prevented the conversation from going further for the time being. Some while later, on a visit to Solarka, Pog is confronted by Kolos, who demanded a rematch during the opening week of the gladiatorial games in the Red Ring. Pog joined a group of would-be gladiators in battle in the ring, a battle in which Pog once again humiliated Kolos and discovered that one of the other combatants was none other than Solarka, still seeking her own adventures. However, the games were interrupted by the same necromancer that disrupted Pog's escape with the map. Leading a troop from the Order of the Emerald Claw, the necromancer Demise raised the bones of those who had died in the ring, and a fight ensued. The heroes managed to stop the attack, but were detained by the Iron Watch, a Warforged militia that handles threats to the city, and discovered that the Stormlords were considering turning them over to the Rekindlers, the order of House Medani that their old teacher Sorin belonged to. However, as the party sat powerless, awaiting to be told their fate, Thora Tavine entered the room and bought the freedom of the group in exchange for military secrets from her time working for the Brelish government. After acquiring their freedom, Thora told the party that she is at the end of her rope and has nowhere else to go, but she wanted their help creating a place where marked people like them don't have to be afraid and could live normal lives. Away from the entrenched power of the houses, she hoped Stormreach can be that place. She told them of her plans to found a school and safe house for marked people, and though they are uncertain that they can trust her, the group decided to help. Over the next several weeks, the hero helped Thora take ownership of the Grimalkin Manor, an abandoned estate floating above Stormreach, where they met and befriended Puzzledust, a fairy dragon, and fought off efforts by Bilge-Rats and Golden Lions to claim the same place. Ari came clean to the group about his curse of forgetfulness and gave Shade his first journal, so that if the worst happens, she would still have a chance of remembering him. Ari and Ezri both sought Thora's help in understanding their marks, and Ari fears he cannot control his, and Ezri feared that if his mark is a so-called true mark, he might lose his place at the school. They carried out their first vigilante missions, disrupting an attempt to smuggle a vampire into the city. They raided a warehouse in which they discovered that dragon-marked houses had been using the Bilge-Rats to smuggle things into and out of Stormreach, including some sort of strange mage-bred creature, and an unusual warforge covered in crystal and bearing what seemed to be an aberrant mark. This warforged name is revealed to be Forge. All the while, Thora sought students and teachers for Grimalkin Academy as the start of the school year approached. Yet all the while, Shade had been steadily having worsening nightmares of Shaytirias Talai. A voice in the dream urged her to seek the city to find her, and soon Shade decided she must go. With the help of a new teacher at the school, Arlo Fletcher, the heroes made a foray into the Feywild, entering into a fairy story about a young half-dryad who had grown bitter and cold. At the climax, rather than hand the girl over to her dryad mother to repeat her tale endlessly, the heroes pulled her from the story and the Feywild. But such interference draws the attention of the Forgotten Prince, who took Ari and the fairy dragon Puzzledust as payment, erasing all memory of them from the material plane. Back in Stormreach, Shade, Pog, and Ezri helped the young half-dryad make herself at home in the grove outside of Grimalkin Manor, and helped her name herself River. Pog and Ezri debated the merits of keeping the House Vatalis experiment stolen from the warehouse in which Forge was found, and all the gang learned that Thora's former partner Dane is in town. They learned that Dane was scoping out an attack on a House Cannith facility, and he invited them to take part, but after a conversation with Thora, they agreed that it would draw too much attention to the school and declined. Meanwhile, Shade wanted to make another attempt at the Feywild and approached the Guardians of Rushame, an organization of giants living in an encampment nearby. The giant Galranak agreed to help Shade reach the Feywild via a magical ritual, and the trio were transported to Shaytirias Talai. At the same time, Ari had been navigating the Feywild with Puzzledust, encountering its many strange denizens in an attempt to find the Forgotten Prince. Eventually, Ari negotiated their return and the lifting of the curse in exchange for a promise of 12 services he would perform. Ari was then transported to Shaytirias Talai just as his friends arrived, and reunited with the party to battle an undead giant in the ancient city. After the battle with the giant, Ezri tested out the growing power of his mark and raised the skeleton to undeath, drawing the attention of the Arani Death Guard, an order of elven knights who patrolled ancient ruins hunting the undead. When Ezri displayed his mark openly, the Death Guard attacked, and though the party are victorious, Ezri was killed. In death, Ezri is met by a half-dragon woman calling herself Arandis, and bearing the same mark as Ezri. She agreed to send him back and offered him the names of those loyal to her whose aid he might call on. With Ezri recovered, the party set forth into Shaytirias Talai, eventually meeting a pair of Kitsune who agreed to guide them to the Sphinx that dwelt in the city. Shade met the Sphinx Harazi, who revealed to that Shade is not a shifter, but a Kitsune, one of the forest folk who dwelt in Shaytirias Talai thousands of years ago. When Harazi's people were destroyed by the giants, she found refuge with the Fae of the city, but her presence drew the same giants, and in desperation, Harazi used her magic to transport hundreds of Kitsune, including a young Shade, into the future. But the magic went wrong and scattered them in time and space. Harazi had spent all the long years since seeking them for aid and had only been able to reach Shade in her dream memories of the terrible assault on the city by the giants of the Kulsir Dominion. After teaching Shade how to shift her form as a kitsune and giving her gifts, Harazi sent the party back to Grimalkin. The party returned on the first day of class to discover the students under threat from the House Vatalis experiment Esri had left locked in the basement. The party, now known as the Strike Force, spelled with a Y, destroyed the monster and are introduced to the first class of the Grimalkin Academy: Pip, Mo, Kara, Nasaria, and Donabella. Kara and Esri get off to a rocky start when she entered his room in search of the spirit idol Esri kept there. Speaking with the ancient elven spirit, she learned that Esri bears the mark of death and panics. After intervention by Thora, she agreed to keep the secret. The Strike Force ventured to the Nest to sell some elven artifacts to the Wayfinders and were attacked by another former Blackwheel member and current Stormhammer, Callan. Much changed, and proclaiming himself a Herald of Kulsir, he was accompanied by mutated agents of the Emerald Claw bearing numerous aberrant dragon marks. In a brutal fight that nearly destroyed the Nest, the Strike Force managed to kill Callan and prevent him from stealing the artifacts that he had been sent to acquire. This alarmed the party, but they found themselves frustrated with when the authorities don't see the attack as a portent of doom. Following the attack, the Strike Force accepted another job from Thora's old Citadel contact Lucan, who asked them to provide a distraction to keep the Emerald Claw busy long enough for him and his team to infiltrate the organization's base and steal a powerful weapon he believed they had. Enlisting the aid of the Knights of Thrain, the Strike Force engaged the White Raven and the Emerald Claw in battle near the docks, successfully buying Lucan enough time to complete his operation. The victorious Strike Force collected their reward and headed to the ship's cat for dinner, but Pog instead ventures to the Church of the Silver Flame to investigate an encounter he'd had earlier. Pog finds that he can hear a voice in the flame calling his name and calling him a ghost guardian, calling on him to put himself as a shield between the innocent and those who would harm or oppress them. Pog is uncertain, and his friends advise caution. But all this was interrupted by the return of Hallis Martin, last known to have ventured toward the Obsidian City deep in the jungle, the same destination the Stormhammers had been seeking. Though Hallis seemed more or less himself, the return of both him and Callan caused the Strike Force to wonder exactly what went on in the jungle. Before they can learn, though, Hallis is attacked by the White Raven, demanding to know what happened to the Emerald Claw agents Hallis had been guiding. In the fight, Hallis revealed an unexpected power to create minor earthquakes, severely damaging the ship's cat. The Strike Force intervened, blinding the White Raven and attempting to deceive him long enough to get answers, but in the end the White Raven merely departed after claiming his intent to get vengeance on Pog, who had inadvertently insulted him. Returning to the Academy, the Strike Force were surprised to find that Mrs. Brightdoom, Donabella's mother, revealed that she worked for House Vatalis, and that she had learned recently that Dane and his companions had been captured in their attack on the Kenneth facility and transported to an off-the-books Vatalis facility known as Blackbriar. While it was agreed that Thora should not herself go to rescue Dane, the Strike Force, aided by Nardali and the Moonspear tribe, raid the secret Vatalis facility. In the battle that follows, Esri was slain. In desperation, Shade reached out to Harazi, who used her powers of her lair to roll time back a precious few minutes. This allowed the battle to be refought victoriously, but as the party soon discovered, it also alerted Kulsir to her presence. Sneaking back into the facility, Esri learned that Tommel was in league with Kulsir. The aftermath of the raid on Blackbriar rippled across the lives of the Strike Force. Esri found himself given a mission by Lady Mirabella Uruvi, leader of the House Thorani Enclave in Stormreach. She offered him answers about his ancestry and his mark if he would retrieve a powerful weapon from the Brelish embassy in the city. Meanwhile, Dane and Thora argued over a plan by Dane to turn the weapons of the dragon-marked houses against them, effectively going to war with the 12. Thora rejected the idea, and the Strike Force ultimately decided to stay with her, with Pog telling Dane not to bring division into the Academy ever again. Forge, however, left with Dane. Following Dane's departure, the Strike Force began planning to steal the sword for Lady Miravelli on Esri's behalf. Thora interrupted them with strange tidings. The sword in question had already been stolen by her old Dark Lantern colleague Lucan Stellos. The Strike Force hitched a ride with Malcolm, an ex-Lyrandar pirate, on his ship, the Wildcat. They pursued Lucan across Solargo through the Ondarian embassy and ultimately defeated him in battle aboard a House Orion lightning rail. However, when Ari took the weapon, he found himself possessed by the malign spirit in the blade and tried to flee. His comrades intercepted and defeated him, freeing him from the blade's influence. On their voyage home, they decided the blade was too dangerous to hand over and instead sent it for safekeeping to the Forgotten Prince. The strike forces returned to Stormreach and began attempting to resume normal life. However, in the midst of their plans, the city was struck by a devastating earthquake that collapsed the city's skydock and flooded the harbor. In the aftermath, the Stormlords hired the strike force to descend into a chasm that had opened and investigate the cause of the quake. Far below, they encountered Kulsir himself with several of his disciples, including Tommel, Mirren, and Hallis Martain. Battle ensued, and Tommel banished Ari from the world. Watching helplessly, Ari encountered a mysterious hooded figure who caused Ari's mark to spread across his entire body and gave him the power to break free of the banishment. With the death of two of his disciples, Kulsir departed with Tommel and Mirren. With their success, the strike force now discovered another opportunity. One of the Stormlords, Harbor Lord Jonas Wilkes, was missing. Stormlord Kiris Selshadra hired them to ensure that he did not return. The strike force captured Wilkes and packed him off to the Shadow Marches, but were attacked by agents of House Thorani in the process. After this, Ezri decided that his presence was too dangerous for the strike force and returned to the school in his greenhouse rather than continuing to adventure. Meanwhile, Pog, Shade, and Ari visited the other Stormlords in the hopes of putting an agent of House Tarkanan on the Stormlord Council. While Ari aspired to the post, a tense conversation convinced him to support Thora's bid for power, though the rift between them never quite healed. They accepted the tasks from the jovial but cynical Varen Lassite and the swashbuckling and calculating Paolo Omarin in order to gain their support, and seemed well on their way to securing a place for Thora on the council, a huge victory in their desire to make Stormreach a refuge for the Aberrant Marked. However, personal matters draw their attention. In meeting with Lady Omarin, Pog learned that his estranged father, a high-ranking agent of House Dinnith, was present in Stormreach, and learned through Thora that he must have known about the Blackwheel program, even if he might not have known about Pog's presence. Meanwhile, after so many near-death experiences, Ari decided to make his feelings known to Shade, and the two share their first kiss under mood lighting provided by Puzzle Dust. However, the strike force isn't the only adventuring party in town. In the aftermath of the earthquake, Levexi rallies the Rubble Warren gang to aid her and her friend, Cindy. Kadric, Ilya, Donabella, and Bajak venture into the Undercity, where they discovered a sinister plot by none other than Kalindin de Lirindar to steal the egg of a red dragon. Through cunning, bravery, and the power of friendship, the Rubble Warren gang saved the dragon's egg and were rewarded from the horde of Cindy the Dragon. At the same time, Ari was arranging meetings. Pog and Shade witnessed the abduction of River by a Bandersnatch, which dragged her through a portal into the Feywild. With no time to wait, Pog and Shade dove in pursuit and found themselves in the Feywild. By speaking with Ponderous the Fisherman and Thistle the Pixie, they learned that River had been abducted by the Laughing Lord, and that to reach his domain, they must get past the Jabberwock. Thistle led them to the Forest Queen, who greeted them and sent them to acquire a Vorpal sword from the Green Knight. Pog passed the Green Knight's beheading challenge and claimed the blade, and with it, he and Shade defeated the Jabberwock, allowing the Forest Queen to open a passageway into the domain of the Laughing Lord, whose castle they discover wrapped around with blue pulsing thorn vines, controlled by an entity calling herself the Queen of Thorns. In the top of the tower, they faced River, who had become the Queen of Thorns. They slew the Laughing Lord and told the Queen of Thorns the story of River, the stolen child. Won over by the tale, River returned to herself. However, the Forest Queen told them that without a Fae to rule it, the Laughing Lord's domain would slowly unravel just as Mother Dryads did. River takes the role on herself and remade the domain as a refuge for all who felt alone and abandoned, and she herself became the Keeper of the Grove. After reuniting, Pog, Shade, and Ari completed Lady Omarin's quest, but in escaping were cornered by the White Raven and the Emerald Claw. Rather than fight, they revealed that the Soul Blade had been sent to the Forgotten Prince. Pog, seeking answers about the ghostly figure who aided him in combat, tried to speak to it for the first time and learned that the ghostly figure is a manifestation of many spirits who had gone before into the Silver Flame. But remain there because one of the spirits in the flame wished to stay and protect Pog. Finally, the city prepared to celebrate Burning Titan, the New Year holiday, featuring the Rubble Race, a daring race across the floating ruins over the harbor. The race, however, was interrupted by an attack by Sahuagin, led by none other than Tummel. Battle ensued. The strike force, aided by Ilya Moonspear, Solarka, and Thora, rushed ahead and defeated the Sahuagin. However, Ari, on his own, confronted Tummel. In an ill-fated duel, Ari and Cal are slain and Shade is abducted. Mirren attempted to probe the mind of the unconscious Shade, looking for clues about the location of Hirazi. Coming back to consciousness, Shade stabbed wildly, injuring Mirren and killing Tummel before fleeing. Thora and Pog rushed to her aid, recovered the body of Tummel, and retreated back to the mansion. And so there we are, 150 plus episodes in, and nearing a showdown. I hope that's been helpful. If this is your first time joining us, we hope you'll join us. New episodes of Khyber Shards every Monday. And until next time, thanks for rolling with us.